Okay. Well, we ready? Let's get started.
All right.
Okay.
All right, looks like I'm first. So, um, our plan is our problem is the number of students who are leaving our district to do homeschool. So we want to try and come up with another method of education and develop an alternative school. I have to admit, this session was difficult for me to really pinpoint. Um, but I know reflecting back to chapter 7, I've kind of probably would have a rubric and an ongoing problem of assessing it. So I put on where we would assess our problem, and then develop our formative summative assessment. It's ongoing, so I went with the PAR, the plan, the assign, assess, review, and then like all educational pieces of just continue to be ongoing. And once we feel like we've made our adjustments, we can, formulate the summative plan for that and just move forward with that. So, and then down at the bottom again, I just emphasize we can utilize the PAR um, during these during these sessions. Um, our final task is keep track of our progress. So again, like I said, it's going to be an ongoing problem for us because as we implement it, our goal is by 27, 28 to have it implemented, um, to be able to review it and continue to make assessments and make changes ongoing, um, as we continue to dive deeper into it. So that was how I kind of came up with my solution, and how I would work with the stakeholders to formulate a solution and continue to reassess and move on.
I think the PAR is going to be a resonating theme in our presentations today. It's a good tool, Todd, and I think you've got a pretty good line of where you're going.
Yeah, I would agree. I think par is going to be. I didn't type mine out like that, but I thought about it as I was typing out. So nice job.
Yeah.
Thanks. Like I said, yeah, two or three or four or five of these I've been able to just nail, just as you read the book and okay, this really fits. But it seemed like this week was just a really chapter 7, chapter 8 both were just really hard for me to just feel like I really solidified something. But this is what I came up with after kind of reflecting and reading and reflecting some more. So thanks.
Yeah. I totally agree. I really had trouble with this one and just kind of thought about it myself, like what made sense. So, yeah. Okay. So this is me. So we know my problem is so many English language learners that are in our school, different languages, different backgrounds, and how can we meet all their needs? So I was thinking, like in reading the book, that I was reading about those progress loops and thinking about formative and summative assessments. And I also had kind of a little graphic down at the bottom, which you can't really see, but I was thinking that we would, check our progress as we go, kind of like where I think we'll all say, check the kids themselves, the learners, and see, are they achieving the learning goals? Are they getting the objectives are they meeting the objectives that we want them to meet? So I feel like in that way, we constantly have to be checking them as well as checking what the solution was. Like, what was our solution? What did we implement? And is that working as well? Are there weaknesses? What's working? What's not working? What needs to be improved? What results are we seeing? And then do we have measurable results that these students are actually learning? So, yeah, I would say it's just a constant check-in. Like we do a little bit, we check in. We do a little bit, we check in. But we're not just checking the learners, we're also checking what we implemented as well.
Like we've talked about with like Todd's like just that continuous loop. And it's like what you do when you're in the classroom or anything in the schools. Like you constantly are doing like those formatives to see if it's working and making sure you're on the right track, or how can you redirect because we're not reaching the goals we want. Um, I thought yours was a little unique compared to mine. Mine has to do with just like staff, but you have to look at the students. Like that's how you measure your progress. So I thought that was unique to your situation compared to some of ours.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think you need to, if it's not working, especially working with EL students, you have to adapt. And sometimes you have to adapt mid-lesson, right? I was just in an EL classroom today, and um, she she is such a planner, and she does such a fantastic job. But it might have just been a little bit reaching for some of the students in her class, so she had to adapt right then and there, um, and kind of dial back what she wanted. And so, yeah, you're always given those small little assessments during the lesson, during class to figure out if you have to adapt.
Yeah, this actually happened to me today. I have a student and he will get on a website and translate his Russian language to English because he just kept pointing and asking me for help. And I was saying all these things and he just kept saying no. He was so frustrated. I felt so bad. I was frustrated too. And then he kind of finally used that website to translate Russian to English. And we kind of figured it out, but not really. So yeah, we have a ways to go. So.
Yeah, Brittany, yours was kind of an inspiration as I went through mine from looking at the formative piece. I had looked at some of the documentation, and when you see what mine looks like, it's still nebulous in terms of planning phases. And so, what I'm trying to do is probably maybe back up farther than I should have, but yet trying to go with my original plan. We'll talk about that. But yours was actually a an inspiration for a little bit of what I was doing. And Todd, you touched on it too with the formative. So good job, you two.
Thanks.
I really like the progress loops. I have another problem I'm working on at school right now as we're doing some stuff with our freshman team and then kind of jumped out to me that maybe that's what we could be working with as we progress through this. It's what I'm doing with the freshman team is going to be much easier to probably come to a solution than obviously trying to put in an alternative school. But so it's interesting to see. It's not exactly the same thing you're doing, but we're trying to implement some different things our freshmen, so it's along the same means. But so thanks for sharing those things.
All right, here's mine. So when I was reading and thinking about progress loops, and then I thought about the rubric or the counting system or the weighted system, I was getting I was like, how am I going to get this in to fit to this problem? So I might be way off, but I thought like I did all of my steps in order how I need to do them to get my end goal, which is a new building, right? So on every step, I'm going to assess, review, and if it doesn't make it past that step, I will start from back to stage one and work my way back up to the step where it failed and change and adapt my progress until I ultimately get the end goal is how I thought about this. So engage the community. I would hold town hall meetings, send out surveys to gather information. These surveys, when I read the counting 3-2-1, the weighted system, I thought that was really good because not everyone in our community knows school language. Not everyone in our community knows um, uh, the wordage we're using, or not everyone in our community has the same level of education. Um, so when I look back at last week, when I had my two split of my two problems, I was thinking maybe I could have them rate each solution with their preference, 3-2-1-0 or 2-1-0, to see what the community thinks is a must for growth here. And then I take that data, take to the school board, outline my financial plan with different tax implications for building the new school, respond to question concerns. Hopefully, the school board votes for approval. Then, if I need to increase the levy, decrease the levy in the community for a tax base, work with different advisors to get that on the ballot, hold the community vote. Hopefully it passed. If it doesn't, like I said, I go back to square one, maybe in a year or so to see what I could have done differently, how I can adjust, work my way back through my system. If it is approved, um, give them a timeline for implementation for the project and a projected finish date. That's kind of how I thought. We're getting to the end of the book. I was like, well, pretty soon I'm gonna have to make a decision if this is gonna work or not. So this is what I came up with. Maybe I'm off. Maybe I'm not.
This is a
Awesome.
little off this topic, but like, has your school board like usually been like, do they approve and like, do you guys work well together? Or is it usually like disagreeing? I know like some school boards and like schools like get along really great, where sometimes there's like a little if. So
The school board, from what I understand, is really good to work with. Every time I have interaction with them, they're really good to work with. They always have, our back if we need to adopt something new into the handbook to deal with a problem we're having. They're good to work with. And I believe they were on board for the last bond that they tried to pass a few years ago, which ultimately ended up failing. So
that's good.
I think,
I,
Austin, if, as I listen to what you're saying, it seems like you're doing like the formative assessment at each step. So you're looking for the discrepancies and deficiencies at each step, and then,
mhm.
okay, well, okay, now I need to start over on that one. And so I think you're on a good path, because if step one doesn't work, then there's no reason trying to go to step two, right?
Yeah, that's kind of how I thought about it.
Yeah.
Each of those five bullets that I have is kind of their own milestone, and in the end, trying to get a building built. So that's kind of the approach I took it.
So like
Austin,
that town hall is really cool. You can just do your form assessment on that. How did that come out? What if it worked well? Then yeah. So I really like your approach on that. It's good.
I do too. I think Austin, you're very realistic and you're just so thorough. You're really good at wrapping your head around the whole picture and then really breaking it down and making it make total sense. That's a great idea to use the 3-2-1 rating system, because you're right. Not everyone will understand your language. I love it. Good job.
Yeah, thank you.
Hey, you come a long way, Austin, on this, and I will tell you, I was watching as you were plugging that in there too, and I said he's on the right track here. So yeah, that's pretty good stuff. I like where you've been just in the last week, where you've come with this thing. So hey, good plan, everybody. Nice work.
Thank you.
All right. So, when I was looking at this, I thought like the main thing that I took away from it is like the solution reviews are used as like communication and decision-making vehicles to keep everyone on the same page. So they can't be casual afterthoughts. I thought about that like, oh, you have to come in like ready to go. Like you can't just be like, oh, we should have like a review meeting. We've all been in those meetings where it's like the person did not come prepared. You know what I mean? Or like just thought the conversation would happen. And it just doesn't if there's not something steering it. So I liked those questions. What did we do? So what have we done so far? How did it work? What do we need to do next? Do we need to go back because this didn't work, so we can't move on to the next step? So I liked that cycle and the idea of a formative cycle. It's ongoing till the whole solution is implemented, and then you can look back on it on the end. Being in the classroom still, I see this like all the time. We do this all the time. Formative as I'm teaching like a math unit. And then at the end, I can see, and it's like, okay, as I look back, did we do well in our summative or not? And if not, we're not done. Even if the summative is like the complete part, sometimes it's like, no, our goal isn't quite complete yet. So I thought that was really cool for me. Like that was an easy tie-in. Um, I really thought it's important that like each time we present, so that we celebrate what we've done so far. You can always find like one good positive, especially if your goal is like big and it can be overwhelming at times, to celebrate those little like accomplishments along the way. Just re-energizes you. I think about that with students that may be hard. Just celebrating the littlest successes just like gives everyone more motivation. So yeah, I thought the solution plan worksheet that they showed, the figure 8.3 in the book, was really good at keeping track of progress of the smaller tasks so you can break it down and just keep track of everything in one spot and everyone's on the same page. So that's kind of where I was, that like you need to have ongoing meetings. I liked breaking it down and constantly reviewing, especially like trying to find the positives and then deciding what the next step is. Maybe not all the steps at the beginning, but just one step at a time after each meeting.
It's important to celebrate success with new staff into the district. That's for sure. It's a positive.
Very strong, Megan. I do like where you're going with the feedback too. So and you're backing up as necessary. You certainly have grip on that as well. Good work.
Thank you.
I like how you tied in the lesson to it. As you were talking, I got to thinking a problem is actually like our learning target, right? And then we chunk it along the way, and we have form assessments along the way. Then we have our sum assessment along the way, and we generally reflect back if we give a formative and students don't do well on that, and then we maybe make adjustments. So I guess when you were talking, that kind of set me off a little bit of let's approach the problem like a learning target and follow it the same way we would in a classroom setting or presenting instruction. So that's pretty cool the way you thought of that and tied that in as well.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely well thought out. I remember when I, got into a new school district, it was so overwhelming. So I like that you break it down into little steps and just be like, okay, good job, we accomplished this. Now we're gonna do this. Because they throw everything at you at once, and you're just like, whoa, too much.
Yep.
Megan, how many openings do you guys have for next year already? Do you know?
We've got most of them filled. We're opening up a third middle school next year, so we had quite a few openings there. And then I know, like, just at my school alone, I think we had 5, and I'm 1 out of 8 elementaries. And so, yeah, it's a handful, especially at the middle school level this year. So,
Yeah.
Wow.
So this is kind of a convoluted collection of what you guys have all talked about. Again, our problem, we've been talking about this for weeks, but I'm not going to lie, I went through these chapters several times, going back through, extrapolating information that made sense. And I really sat there and I thought, where am I trying to go with this process? And I put up here to remind us that search strategy is, and it came out of these chapters, experiment-based problem is partially known. And so I'm coming back to that again. And I put it up here for a reason. One of the things that I said inspired me was some of the things that you were talking about, the formative and summatives. Well, the plan, if you remember how I organized this, was to have subcommittees way back when. And those are going to drive it. And when we come back to the formatives, every time we have something moving that we cannot answer, it has to be restarted. And so several weeks ago when we were having the conversation, maybe going too fast, that resonated with me. And so in my head, if any of you have ever been through with a building project before, I watched as they put a vertical timeline where they put a timeline up and they put a string where they were going on certain things. And that's how they designed where they're going with all these subgroups. So they had a horizontal lines on things that were going to be done, and they had a date going this way. And I thought about that as I started putting this together for my final thoughts. So once those problems are identified through those subcommittees, they're still vetted through a flow chart. Then we're going to narrow our focus down. So remember, we're trying to get multiple ideas and get that generated, and it's coming from those subcommittees. We're still working on that piece that backed it up, but we need to use a descriptive rubric. And I believe Todd and I kind of visited about this a little bit. I don't think it's numerical because my hope is the descriptors will closely relate to represent what we're understanding. And that's what we're looking at. So, but what does that look like? My ultimate plan was to have those stakeholders help create that rubric and what was going to be in it. And so again, I'm overthinking it, but I want this to be their process because they'll own it better. Then we can use a solution plan as design the text. And there's that PAR again, that plan, assess, or assign, assess, and review. Then the action plan, that's outlined in there as well. I think one of you even talked about it. Finding what the key people are, the lead people, the resources, and then the ideas about the moving thread is right down there at the bottom. The specific covers the timeline. And those are formative piece that you can continue to look at using the meeting milestones. That's a formative piece. Flip charts we could utilize as a formative piece, and then before, during, and after plans. Those are formative and summative. So all of those things conglomerate, come together to help us put some plan in place. But remember, my note is that one thing I'm trying to get across is everything is set in motion with those subcommittees, and questions get returned to the subcommittee where it originated from if there's a question. So that's that slow process we're talking about, goes back to the start, and we keep building them back up again. So it's still in traction, because it's the essence of that rule 18: timeout, rethink, and reset, because you have to start again if you have created a new problem. So there's a lot to what I'm trying to accomplish with this, but there's a lot of moving parts to it. And I have reassessed this multiple times. I actually visited with Dr. C and Dr. Stogdill today on my progress for my program on 784 or 786. But we got off on talking about this particular problem on right now and how it changes. So that's where I'm at. We are going to try to put some additional pieces in place. We'll define our plan fully in place. I'm trying not to go too fast, because I had a pretty solid action plan 2 weeks ago, and that was way ahead of the curve. So that makes sense.
Yeah, I like how you're going to have them create their rubric, kind of like what I alluded to earlier about not having the same language, and it also gives them some ownership. So when they do see some threes, some fives of high need, and you have three different towns trying to vote on it, there's some ownership, and they'll say, okay, maybe we do need to get this done.
I really enjoy how much you're leaning into your subcommittees, like working with subcommittees, because I just think when I'm on like a committee and when we're broken into smaller groups, how much more involved I become or feel like I can have like a voice. Whereas like when we're in one big room, it's really hard to be able to get everyone involved, everyone's voice heard. So I think it's just really crucial, especially with like how many people you impact and how many different groups, that you do use those subcommittees well. So I really like how like each of the subcommittees are pretty much having their formative and summative assessments.
Yeah. That'll increase engagement so much.
I'd agree with the subcommittees, just the same thing when you're a large group. Some people may be, well, I don't want to speak because I maybe don't sound whatever, but you get into small groups and you feel more comfortable in that small group and you can share something, especially where, you're going to have three communities trying to come up with a solution. So yeah, it's a good job there.
Well, I appreciate you folks on this, because your feedback is important to me on this. But you remember, I had them decide what committee they wanted to be on too, so it was full on their choice. And so when they're in that, there's your ownership. If I'm going to be part of whatever the subcommittee might be, I mean, I had them broke out early on, but they're going to help define that. They're going to decide, well, we're going to work on this piece. We're going to work on this piece. This is the information we're going to gather, and then they're excited about that. So they should be able to be more vested in that process. Well, change is messy. It's inconvenient, but it is absolutely necessary to grow. And so that's what I'm trying to put through with this process, because it is not going to be an easy switch to get this off the ground. But I do appreciate your feedback.
I think Gretna can lean into that so much. Change is not easy because our boundaries get like redone every single year. So, we got families upset about moving schools, but we're growing. And if you don't want your kids in classes of like 40, we got to make new buildings. And so, but yeah, change is hard for everyone. So, and it's just like students, like when you give them the option, the buy-in is so much higher than if you just tell them you're on this committee.
So last question for all of you. Do any of you see having been through this process now several times during this, do you see a different way of approaching this than what I'm trying to do here, or a way streamline what I'm trying to accomplish?
I don't think there's a way to streamline it. I think there's so much involved with trying to get accomplished what you need to for your community. Um, I think you're on the right track. I really do.
Thank you, Austin.
I would agree. There's so many people involved and it's such a like it is a big problem. Like, it's going to take a big solution. And so with that, it doesn't come easy. And like most good things, like we say, don't come easy. But yeah, I don't think there's any way you can't cut corners on something like this.
And it
I
looks
agree,
like,
Michael.
Troy, with what you have there, Mike, is that one of the rules was adhere to the processes and don't deviate from it. So here's your process, and we're going to continue with this process. And what you're trying to do is a huge undertaking. So it'd be very easy to say, well, okay, maybe we'll deviate this time. But once you deviate, then you get yourself off track. So yeah, there's a lot there. But even though there's a lot there, you've got a reason and a method and a way that you're doing things. You've got your process in mind and in place. So it's well thought out. So good job.
Yeah, you've really thought through this and you can tell you're very passionate about it, you know.
No, I'm just after the grade. That's all there is to it.
Okay.
No, it's all
I
good. I do
created this
appreciate that.
problem for the grade.
Folks, we've talked about this already. These chapters have been very difficult to try to tie together, and we've all alluded to it. So, I think this team did a great job. I really do.
Yeah.
I
I
agree.
would echo
Really
that.
appreciate the collaboration. Makes me feel like I'm not way off and also just gives me some new insights. So thank you guys.
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
Good job.
All righty.